Hi, you are joining the SMGDenver group, and we're going to be talking today about using social media for customer retention. So before we get started, let me just quickly introduce the fact that SMGDenver stands for Social Marketing Group in Denver. We're an in-real-life meetup group, and we get together once a month. Our group is sponsored by Webolutions, which is a local strategic marketing group. And they bring us together once a month, and we talk about social media marketing. They give us handouts. They have a great presenter. We have breakout groups at the toward the end of that session, and we discuss the various platforms that we're using in social media, and then we share at least one tip with the larger group. Typically, we have about 100 people at these meetups, and we get a lot of information, and it's so much information that I would find myself coming home overwhelmed, not knowing where to start. So one of the purposes of this particular HOA is so that we can kind of preview the topic that's going to be presented at our Friday, our third weekly, it's the third Friday of every month. And so we preview that topic. This month it's customer retention, using social media for customer retention. Preview it, talk about what we're anticipating hearing about at the meetup, why we're interested in the topic, why are we interested in customer retention, and maybe what we are already doing as part of our own customer retention strategy. And then when we get together on Friday in real life, we will hear more about it, and next Tuesday we'll have another HOA to talk about how we as individuals might want to apply the new information, or what we learned, or whatever our little heads decide about social media marketing that we learned at the meetup. So we also, one of the other objectives of this HOA is so that our in real life meetup group has an opportunity to explore the HOA technology and get comfortable with it and start using it in our own business operations. So that's something that it's still fairly new to a lot of people, and we just want to make a very safe and comfortable environment to try this technology out. So all that said, I want to introduce our panelists. And 3 of our panelists are actually members of the In Real Life Social Marketing Group meetup. And so Gary, John, and Peter will introduce themselves. And then we have a special guest, and that's Sheila Strover, who is in the UK, and she's part of the Hangout Mastery group, which is the group that helps me learn about HOAs. And Sheila and I met there, and she would just like to get a little more experience using the HOA technology, so we invited her to be on our panel as well. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Of course, their G+ profiles are linked in the description section of the event, so you can get all their resume background sort of thing. But I do want them to give a brief introduction of themselves too. I'm going to start with Gary, followed by John, then Peter, and then we'll have our special guest, Sheila. So Gary?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Pokorn. I'm based in Littleton, Colorado, and I have been attending the social media marketing for business meetup that Debbie referred to since its beginning. I am a sales professional, and I've been trying to figure out over the years how much of this technology and social and marketing activities make sense for a sales professional to leverage in our side of the business.
Okay. John?
Well, good morning. I'm John Harris. I actually live in Littleton, Colorado, so Gary and I could probably get together for a cup of coffee one morning, maybe a donut or two. I work with the Read Art and Imaging in Denver. We are a fine art reproduction facility, and we pride ourselves in creating the maximum visual experience for the creative professional.
Thanks, John. Peter?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Hodges. I'm Marketing Director for Marathon Consulting and Stack Advisors. Marathon provides proactive IT strategy, system design, and ongoing support for small and medium-sized businesses. And I live in Castle Rock, out in the sticks, and commute to downtown Denver every day. So I'm a hard-working kind of guy.
Glad to have you with us, Peter. Sheila?
Hi everybody, Sheila Strover. Now I'm a long way away from this slot. I'm in Cornwall in the UK, down in the bottom left-hand toe of the UK, and a beautiful area of the world, buffeted this winter by storms. I'm both a medic and a businesswoman. I have a background in both, and I run a medical website for people with knee problems, where I have a big community of people, patients with knee problems, and a big community of medical professionals who are serving them. And I stand between the two of them and facilitate the process of learning.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Sheila, and we're glad that you can join us today. I also want to say good morning to Sandra, she's such a loyal participant in these. We really appreciate the Sandra, because this is a little early. So she's saying good morning to us, and we look forward to seeing her comments. She's always got something interesting or important to say. And in fact, I'd like to bring up Sandra right now, because I just took a look. I have a circle that I call SMGDenver, and I put that at the top of my not my profile, but my home page on G+. And then I can just click on SMG, and I can see everybody in my SMG circle, and I've got like 79 or 80 people in that, and I can see what they're doing on Google+. And Sandra has been particularly, she's very consistent with her posts on social media. So if you want to see how to do it right, you can get on, follow Sandra and watch how she posts. And she always prefaces her posts with an interesting comment about why she found whatever she's linking to, why she found it important or interesting. She adds her perspective. She usually has something kind of provocative to say about it, making you want to read what she found so interesting. And I noticed yesterday, Sandra, that you posted an excerpt from an HOA that you ran recently, and Sean Mahan, I think, was one of your guests, and he is fairly new with Google+, which is Sandra's target market. She teaches the ABCs of Google+, and so she brings in people who are brand new and helps them get acclimated and oriented. And so Sean was her guest on an HOA, and he went on about how wonderful he thinks HOAs are and how they're helping him. So that was Sandra's post yesterday. It was a nice example of how you can take an hour-long HOA and just, she excerpted, it was less than a minute, I think, but it was a powerful statement by that one participant, and she used that then as a post to, emphasize the point that he was making. So that was really valuable, Sandra, and I thought a great example of how to use Google+ well. So please check out Sandra's posts. She really does have this thing figured out, and thank you, Sandra, for being there. So let's get kicked off, and if I forget to blue box somebody, Sandra, let me know, because I feel a bit distracted this morning. Anyways, we're going to be talking about customer retention, like I said earlier. So I posed several different questions to the panelists, asked them to reflect on them. I'm going to read those questions off right now. Now, whether or not our conversation follows that line of questioning, it's kind of a crapshoot. We get together, we have a discussion in the morning. We've all got a cup of coffee or something to drink. Sheila, it's afternoon for you, but for us it's early morning. The 5 questions that we've been reflecting on are, not including social media, what techniques is my business using in its customer retention strategy? How has the effectiveness of traditional methods of customer retention been affected by social media? As a consumer, how is my loyalty retained by businesses that I buy from? Should social media as a retention tool be part of the marketing strategy or part of the sales strategy? And then finally, how much time or expense is my business willing to invest in social media as part of the customer retention strategy? So I'm going to shut up now for a while, and I am going to ask any of my panelists who have something to say on any of that to just jump in there, take the initiative, go for it, and inform us. And here we have crickets. All right, you know what, Gary?
I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to be the talker in the bunch, so I was trying to sit back and create a space for everybody else to jump in. But you know, we have found that social media is an important, not necessarily critical, but an important part of our customer retention plan. In that we tend to be, when I say we at Reed tend to be a very social bunch. And as a result, we tend to attract that same type of mindset or individual as a client base. So we have a lot of our clients who like to stay in touch and be social. And we have found that social media is a great way for us to do that. Facebook used to be the ideal method for us. Pardon me for dropping the F word here. But Facebook used to be the ideal platform for us to do that until they started shifting their algorithms so that a company post really only showed up to about 10% of your follower base. So anytime we post anything, we're really only able to reach out and touch 10% of those people who like us. So as a result, Facebook is becoming less and less important to us in our social media campaigns. However, the advantage that we find is because we work with creative professionals. Creative professionals love to get feedback on their work, and we actually love to give them feedback, and we love to engage with them surrounding their latest projects, and it's just something we naturally love to do. So Facebook, Google+, Instagram, Flickr, these types of creative-based social media platforms allow us then to reach out to them and really truly engage, because they like to post their latest work, and we can get on there and say, hey, that's a great piece, love that, been there, had a great time, check out this shot of mine from there. And because customer relationship is a relationship, and longevity from that customer sometimes depends on how solid that relationship is. Staying in touch, we believe, is an integral part of that. So whether it happens through social media or whether it happens through email, or better yet through a phone call, pick up a phone and give them a call and really have a heart-to-heart discussion with them, we find that any type of engagement that you can have with your customer is not only enjoyable, but we feel it's an important part of retention.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. Okay, Peter, it sounds like you've got something to say on that?
Sure, I would say that we agree with that. For retention, we use social media to help people feel good about the decision they made to go with us. Does that make sense? In terms, it's our opportunity to reinforce the value that we provide, and there's always a little bit of buyer's remorse that might be out there, and we can effectively neutralize it by using social media to express the personality of the people at Marathon. For example, we have hardwood floors at the office in Brooklyn, and we decided everybody who works in Brooklyn could buy a pair of slippers on the company. And you'd be surprised how creative people got with the slippers. So we had everyone take a picture of their slippers. We posted them on Facebook, and we played Guess Who It Is. So it was just a picture of people's feet. And I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but it reinforces that Marathon's a real company made up of real people who are fun to be around, and it makes people feel good about choosing Marathon as their IT provider.
That actually sounds like a lot of fun. I know that you guys also do a newsletter that I have found to be very, kind of down to earth and customer focused. On this, I've been following that now for the last 2 or 3 months since you've been, putting it out, and so you guys obviously do, think about what is it that your customers are seeking as far as information or help. Gary, did you want to add anything?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. Going back to your first question, not including social media, some ideas around customer retention and such. And I promised my wife this morning that I would give her a shout out. She is in a business to consumer business called Fit Pets and People, and she specializes in providing healthy dog and cat food to the four-legged family members of her clients. And one of the retention strategies that she pursues that I really like is she sends, after every order, she sends a send-out card to each of her clients from their pet. So they receive a thank you card from their dog or cat. Since their pets can't speak, Debi has figured out how to use a very traditional direct mail approach to be the voice of the pet, thanking the owner for looking after their health. And I thought that that was, number one, very clever. Number two, very one-to-one in a marketing sort of way, very personalized. And number three, you'd be amazed how many phone calls she gets from her clients acknowledging the receipt of that card and thanking her for being so clever with that approach. So I promised her I would give her a call out to today, because that's not a traditional social media approach. It's more of a legacy media approach, but she finds it to be very effective.
Thank you so much for bringing her her business up, and tell her we appreciate a unbelievably creative idea. I love the idea. I don't even have a pet, but I've had pets in the past, and how cool that would be to get a postcard, you know, from my dog named Duncan. So I like that a lot, and that's a non-social media approach, a technique. It's not really a tool, but a technique. Sheila, do you have anything that you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I actually found myself incredibly confused about social media. I've been in this game quite a long time, and my business was social media. It was a bulletin board with thousands and thousands of people there every day using usernames, so I didn't know who anybody was. And I stood back from them quite quickly because I found that patients knew much more about their conditions than I did. So I was a facilitator, really. And when a colleague, my colleague Leah Davies, said, look, you must do Twitter, you must do Facebook, you must get involved in social media, I was confused because that seemed to be taking my customers away rather than bringing them in. Now I've realized that it's kind of, it's like a carpet. You have to weave different platforms for different peoples to engage in different ways. So, for example, there's a big specialist group on Facebook that they dip into my site and then they all dip out and they go and work in Facebook and then they dip back in again. So, so social media to me is working very differently, I think, from the bricks and mortar people that you know have product and environment that they can bring people into. I'm rather more afraid that it'll take my people away. So.
This is such a frontier for all of us, and it's been, I got involved in social media in 2009, so I'm hitting 5 years. On May 9th this year, it'll be 5 years that I have been sleeping and eating and drinking and breathing social media, trying to understand it. And yes, in fact, you really do need to figure out, I loved your metaphor, you know, weaving, Sheila, because we're all going to create a different pattern and a different texture and a different emphasis design for our social media usage based on our objectives and our client base. And I think that, you know, Sheila, I hear a lot of people say, well, I have a unique situation, so I can't do what you're talking to me about. And that's actually one of the reasons I like to have these HOAs, because we hear on a monthly basis about a set of tools or techniques or some sort of emphasis around social media. And I do hear a lot of people saying, well, that won't work for me, that won't work for me, that won't work for me. I think the point is that what you have to understand is you have to figure out how to make it work for you by customizing that approach, customizing that tool, taking a good look at your own business, your own objectives, the persona of your clients. We've talked a lot about our client personas and how that's going to shape the way you use social media. So these conversations are always great for me because I'll hear something very creative. Slippers, for example. I love slippers. I think it's a great idea. I would love to show you. I'm going to show you my slipper right now. And a lot of people think that I'm poor and can't afford to get a new slipper. There's this hole in it. These are like LL Bean slippers. These things are so comfortable. I just don't want to get rid of it yet. It's got a little hole. I can live with that. I wear a wool sock underneath it. I love slippers. I wear them all the time. My other one doesn't look so bad. This one's in good shape. So, I mean, as long as half of it's still holding together.
You need to tell the LL Bean folks that. I'm sure that they would love to put that on social media.
You know what? You're probably right. I should probably send them a picture of my LL Bean slipper. I also have 2 pairs just like this in my closet that are completely worn out, but I won't throw them out because I love these slippers. I create a relationship with my slippers. Anyways, that and then a postcard, from my dog would be very creative stuff. So we all have to think of ways to use these tools to meet our own needs and be, kind of fun and interesting and creative. Speaking of creative, I would like to bring up this comment from David Veal. David is no longer in the Denver area, but he's in California now. So he, I think, is commenting on John's initial conversation. I'm a creative and love feedback. Yep. So, David, I'm glad you can join us today. It's nice to have you here. Okay, let me see. We've got some comments going here on the side. So what I'm going to do is let you guys. Oh, we have. All right. I'm going to highlight John.
Ta-da.
One thing. Ta-da! Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So David remarks. One thing you want to avoid is exchanging social media for some other marketing paths that are still working for you. I've seen it happen, and I agree. I've seen it happen too. People hear this whisper or this rumor that social media is the end-all, be-all, cure-all for their marketing woes. Well, it's not. It's just one more form of reach. And by reach, what that means is a touch point for an existing customer or prospective customer on the other end. It's just how you reach out to them and communicate your message. It's just one of many forms of reach. And there's no mystery or magic behind social media. It's just like, again, any other form of reach, you have to do your homework. You have to discover what works best for you. You have to work up a plan or a concept, stick to it, try it for a while, see how effective it is for you, see where it's ineffective for you. Social media isn't for everybody either. There are some businesses that just don't gain from social media. In part because it's not right, and sometimes in part because they just don't do well at it. If they're doing well at some other channel, then by all means, keep doing what's working. Whatever works for you, do more of it. Whatever's not working for you, do less of it. Pretty simple, right? To give you an example of a company that might not benefit from social media to a great degree is, let's say, a drain cleaning company, right? Out here in Colorado, or in the U.S., we tend to give them a generic term called Roto-Rooter, and Roto-Rooter just happened to be a national chain that first specialized in doing nothing but cleaning roots and muck out of your sewer drains. So, how engaging do you feel a company could be who does nothing but clean muck out of sewer drains, right? How interested would you as a social media user actually want to follow them on social media to hear what they have to say, right? So there's not a great likelihood that Facebook would be a powerful tool for them as far as customer retention goes. So they might have to look outside of social media for their retention plans. So I fully agree with David. Don't abandon things that are already working for you just because you want to test out new waters.
John, I feel like that was almost a softball because my most recent client is called Pipe Spies, and their business is to put cameras down pipelines and find cracks and tree roots and all that sort of thing. And I've been working with them for the last 2 months, and we have come up with some fabulously creative ways of engaging their customers through social media, because we're not focusing on just that mucky drain pipe, but we came up with a set of themes that would be interesting to their clients. For example, one of the reasons drains, our pipes get all cracked and broken and that you have plumbing problems is because of the tree roots. And big old houses have big old trees, so we decided one of our themes on in their blog content strategy is to talk about historical homes in Denver. And that's a really fun subject matter, but historical homeowners usually take great pride in their historical homes and would be interested in the kinds of problems historical homes have, and one of them is massive tree roots in their pipeline. So that's we came up with 4 or 5 themes that we're going to be working into their content strategy, but we knew, you know what? Mucked up pipes is not that sexy. It's just hard to talk about it. So anyways, so that gave me an opportunity to talk about that. What I want to do right now is Gary has a standing meeting on Tuesday mornings, and I know he has to leave us shortly. And Gary, there was one of these questions that we put out there, which, by the way, folks, I put out on the comment. Catherine Alberts, good morning, Catherine. She asked us to put the questions in the comment block here on the event page, so I went ahead and did that. Gary, one of the questions, I was actually thinking about you when I wrote the question.
Uh-oh.
Yes, I know it. Should social media as a retention tool be part of the marketing strategy or part of the sales strategy? Is that something that you can speak to for us, because you are the sales professional among this group?
Well, thanks, Debbie. By the way, I've gotten a pass to stay for the whole meeting today. So
yes!
My boss is off skiing, so I'm going to stay with you folks past the top of the hour.
Cool.
Yes, they say when the cat's away, the mice turn into rats.
There you go. There you go. So yes, I am the resident sales professional, also known as the antagonist of the group. And I have attended a lot of marketing-sponsored events in the last 30 days, and a few sales-sponsored events. And what I've noticed is this is a pretty common conversation among us on the vendor side, asking the question, who should own the customer? Should the sales organization own the customer? Should the marketing organization own the customer? So there's been great debate on this, and as I reflected on it, I remember a quote, I'll paraphrase, from Abraham Lincoln back in the day, where he was mentioning the lack of sense of 2 fleas arguing amongst one another who owns the dog. I think really from the customer's perspective, they no longer care whether the vendor's messaging is coming from a sales professional or a marketing professional. I think that's very last century thinking. I think the customer of this century just wants the message, whoever originates it, to be relevant and useful. And so, going back, John, to the Roto-Rooter example that you were mentioning, what would be very useful for a drain cleaning service, I think, from the customer's perspective, because, if you've been in that situation where you need to engage their service reactively, Debbie, versus your customer, which really is at the proactive end of that same issue. On the Roto-Rooter side, what I would be interested in is a social site showing where their trucks are in proximity to my house and allowing me to book them without calling, perhaps waiting for a call back, perhaps talking to an answering service. When you're in a 7x24 business, what the customer really wants in that setting is they want to know how quickly can this particular service come to my need, and if they can't come to my need quickly, I need to find somebody else. And so I think that what's important in this sales versus marketing debate is that we really think in terms of how we would want to be contacted if we were the customer, and whether it originates from a sales professional or a marketing professional, I think the customer could care less.
So Gary, if I could ask you, because I know that you work with large organizations and you do training of other sales professionals, is that correct?
I do.
Right. So as you're preparing your training, I know that you need to know your audience really well so that you can speak to them and all that stuff that public speakers do. When you're getting oriented to your audience, do you get the impression that their organization is suggesting that they use social media as part of their approach?
Well, I would say this. Social media is here sort of whether we want it to be or not. And I think every vendor, I'll use the term vendor, every vendor has been trying to figure out, in my opinion, how to leverage this to their advantage. I think it's very difficult to measure the impact that social has. You can measure likes and you can measure followers and those types of metrics. But I think when you get up to the business ownership level, the challenge is always, how does this convert to revenue? And so I just want to say that everybody's trying to figure out how to use this effectively, and I think the backdrop is the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? Do our customers really want us to blog to them? Do our customers really find our voice above the din of all of the social interaction that's taking place, a lot of which, by the way, is machine generated and not even a human generated voice? So I think it's a challenge in this century. I certainly don't have any answers to that challenge. That's why I joined groups like this, is I'm trying to figure it out like the rest of you, I guess.
I'm so glad, John, that you can, Gary, that you can stay through the whole hour today. You come, first of all, is the juice worth the squeeze? Love that, wrote it down in quotes. I have not heard that one before, and it's just a great way of imaging that. Sandra says, so true, Gary, the title is no longer important, but a real message is king, and I think that is what we're all getting to. And Gary, when you came on, you said you're the antagonist of the group, and I'm not sure that, I think you view yourself that way more than anybody else does, because in traditional methods of marketing, sales and marketing were sometimes pitted against each other. I know I've worked in organizations where it's very kind of contentious relationship between those two groups, and I think that those lines are being blurred, and I'm happy about that. The other thing you brought up, Gary, was a lot of times the messaging or the social media channels are not even human, they're being automated, and I think that's a point, well taken. It's not always true. I think people who do it well have backed off on that automation thing because we have found out that it doesn't work so well. You also brought up the topic of, what's the return on this investment? I don't think you use those terms, but I've often heard people say, well, what's the return on the investment of your telephone? Or, as far as does it generate sales? And if you can't come up with an exact count of how does this affect our return, well, then get rid of the telephone and see how your business works. And I've also heard of ROI as being interpreted as risk of ignorance or risk of ignoring. So if you don't use social media, what risk are you running? So just all these ideas are just flooding into my head right now.
Debi,
so yes.
Real quick, one thing I think we need to think about with social media content is we think a little bit old school in terms of publishing and then it being read. I like to think of our blog as kind of a virtual salesperson. When I write about evergreen topics, for example, I wrote a blog post about why managed services, that our industry is frequently called managed services, why managed services makes sense for your business. And that's going to sit out there And 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now, someone who's finally made the decision that they need an IT provider is going to start to search in Google and try and understand what their options might be, and hopefully I'm going to be sitting there waiting for them. Does that make sense?
Well, Peter,
yeah, it makes good sense.
you used the magic phrase.
What's that?
Hopefully they will find you.
Oh yeah, I can't guarantee it.
That's the challenge, right? That's the
Right.
challenge when I look at these tools. The first question that comes to my mind is, how does my message stand above the din? And I'm just not convinced that my message does stand above the din. And Debbie, to your point, the telephone is a very one-to-one. That's not a marketing tool. That's a sales tool. And that's very one-to-one. And I know that I can measure the effectiveness of that tool. It's very simple to do. So these are complex metrics in our marketplace today. And I'll be darned if I can figure out how the buyer preference ultimately will shake out.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny, Gary. You see the telephone as a sales tool, and yet the word telemarketing comes into my head immediately. And so I think that there is probably a huge population that sees it as a marketing tool as well. So, and I think that's likewise with social media. It is both a sales and a marketing tool. But I think that we're figuring it out. We're figuring out how everybody can use the tool in the best possible way. And then when you said hopefully they'll find you, one of the things that we don't talk a lot about, but if you're on social media and you are getting engagement because you do have a good message, as like you said, Gary, that's sometimes a difficult thing to do. How can you make your message rise above the din? But if you are good at it and you get engagement, it increases the size of your digital footprint, which is an important thing to think about when we're in this age of Google search, because
Absolutely.
People are searching. So you want if you have a larger digital footprint, meaning you've got
people will find you.
Exactly. And so quality absolutely is important because it helps to spread that footprint out. But if you're not using social media at all, you're probably not going to have as big a digital footprint, right?
Absolutely. You're just not there.
Right.
I mean, a good example with this, and then we can kind of get back on topic because we're kind of getting into the SEO area, but I mean, I'm happy to go there if we'd like, is if you have a negative review for your business, a good way to manage that negative review is to start putting out other content that's relevant to your business, and Google will frequently push that negative review down the page. So by adding to your footprint and just being part of the conversation, like Webolutions likes to say, it's a long-term game, basically, is how I approach it. Is, like I said, when you publish it on Monday, are you going to get a sale on Tuesday? Probably not. But with our newsletter, we just got our first potential sales opportunity, and it's been 3 months. We were talking about a product that we offer, and we had a client go, "Oh, I didn't know you did that. I'd love to talk to you about that." So it's a long-term approach is the best way, I think, to think about this.
And you know what, Peter? I think next month our topic for the social media group in Denver is customer referral, using social media for customer referral. And I think that I would love to get more into the discussion about SEO and that sort of thing. I hope you'll be part of the panel next month as well on that, because that's a whole nother aspect of this. John, I noticed that you had highlighted a comment. Did you want to bring that up?
David Veal had brought up this great point. Let's say you have 1,000 followers versus 10,000 followers. You might not be hitting enough people for your time. You might not be getting the juice for the squeeze, as Gary put forth. And what do you expect the 200 people of your 1,000 who might see the message fly by them? What do you expect them to do? And you would hope that they would share that message. But Sandra also brought up an excellent point, and I'm I'm a big advocate for this, and she and I have had discussions around this. Does our target market wait with bated breath to see what we will say next? And for the most part, I'm going to say no. Right now, no. We're in the midst of a social media glut. What Gary so properly put as a din. You know, there's just so much social media out there, and there's so many messages that are flying by our own personal channels that it's hard for us to take a look at those channels and grasp at what we want to see at that very moment. And so things tend to get pushed to the bottom of our feeds, and they get ignored. So if you're putting out a post and you have 1,000 followers, and maybe, if you're lucky, 200 of those will see them. Chances are you're going to get less than 1% that happen to see it because it's so timely right now. So one of the things that we're trying to do in our company is we're trying to shift our social media plan so that we're putting out far less content, and we're putting out far more valuable content. We're trying to step away from content for the sake of content. We're trying to step away from that accepted golden rule of 3 posts a day. I would rather put out 3 posts a week that are such good content that every time we post something, people want to find it and they want to read it. I want to put nothing but gems out there so that our voice is not just heard above the din, but it's actively sought out above the din. Does that make
That makes sense, and thanks, Sandra, for bringing that up, because even when John just read your comment there, are they waiting with bated breath? You know, I'm like, wow, that would be my ideal world, that people are just waiting to hear what I have to say. And so that I think that's a great, it would be great to strive toward that. But oof, what a challenge. I mean, I find that would be really, really difficult.
It'd be a lot of pressure.
It would be a huge amount of pressure, but you know what? I get a feeling that once you found your rhythm doing that, once you really dug in deep and you knew who you were talking to, like you said, Peter, you talk specifically, when you write a blog post, you're talking specifically to the customer. Once you see that work well for you, I think you could get a rhythm and become good at it. I'm hoping anyways. We'll see.
And I think there is something to be said for rhythm. People kind of look for you to show up at a certain point, either in the morning or in the afternoon or on the weekend or something like that. So we've done that at Marathon. Is we've taken it down to 1 post a day, and we try and make sure it's a good one, as opposed to just putting things out. But on my personal stuff, I've started posting more frequently, and I've seen my Twitter following go up. I didn't expect it, but I'm less concerned there. It's an experiment about, am I doing it too much? If I am doing it too much, just don't follow me, is how I approach it.
Right. We all, you know what? The consumer is in control. The person who's absorbing your messaging, they can unfollow you or unfriend you or whatever. So you just have to leave it up to them and be comfortable doing that. That's part of the social media part. Sheila, I would like to bring you in only because I'd like to listen to your accent for a little while. And I know we don't give many people a space to get a word in edgewise. So can I ask you, do you have some thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, first of all, my accent is Zimbabwean, strangely enough.
No kidding. Well, I love it.
I was schooled in Zimbabwe, so an English person would say I have an accent. But an American person thinks I have an English accent. But
yeah,
it's
it sounds English.
Zimbabwean one. I'm listening to your conversation about content creation and the value of content creation, and I'm incredibly lucky because, in fact, my community, over the years of 15 or 17 years that it's been going, have educated themselves to such an extent, much like the Hangout Mastery people are starting to do, that they themselves are creating the content and the valuable content, and I very often learn from them. So I've got thousands of people daily talking about very complex knee issues, and people are finding them on social media and coming in to read what they're saying. And the only time that they kind of refer to me is if there's some dispute about a particular situation. One of them will say, why don't you go and read this article that Sheila's produced for us, maybe with another surgeon, because I don't write much of the content myself. I work with surgeons and physiotherapists to write the content. So the people out there in the big wide world are actually finding my community's posts. They're reading my community's posts, and then they're going to the high value content secondarily. They're not coming in very often for the high value thing. So I've got a back to front situation in a way. The community is so big and so strong. And I see it happening in the Hangout Mastery. When I joined, it was Ronnie Binsett was answering everybody's questions. And now he just pops in and says, well done, Debbie, that's good, and just patting the community on the back for answering the questions for him. So, I'm getting much the same situation, really.
Fabulous comment. You reminded me of, I read a book a while ago by Joseph Jaffee, Jaffe, and the name of it is called Flip the Funnel. We talk about the marketing funnel. Yeah, I see you nodding your head, Peter. You and I read a lot of the same stuff.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. And what he talked about was, at the narrow end of the funnel, that's where you're attracting in through your very small little social networks, your Facebook and your Twitter and that sort of thing, and you're bringing them in on the narrow end of the funnel, and then you're allowing them to become your voice. Much like you're saying here, Sheila, is that they start talking and start saying, oh yeah, go check out Sheila's article. And they start talking for you, and they become your marketing team, and actually a megaphone. I picture it as a megaphone, comes through the narrow end, and then it goes out through the wide end. Again, that's Flip the Funnel. And I read that probably, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago now, Peter. I don't know if you remember. I got it from the library, and now I have it on my ebook.
It's been a while.
It's been a little while, yeah. So, anyways, really, really great point. Sheila also stresses community, which here on Google Plus, I have found communities to be that is my number one tool in my arsenal. And last night we did an HOA talking about community-centered HOAs. I've just found that to be really an incredibly huge tool and effective tool. Speaking of tools now, again, the topic that we're going to be talking about on Friday at our meetup is using social media for customer retention. And I am anticipating that Webolutions and their presenter, I don't know if it'll be Mike or Jody or who's going to be presenting on Friday, but they typically talk about tools that allow us to then apply our own technique and align them with our own objectives. And Mike Hanberry posted a blog post earlier this month, I think it was definitely earlier this month. I've already read it. So it's about using advertising on Facebook. And to me, that's a tool. What I've been hearing this panel talk about are techniques. Our techniques for using those tools. And so that's why I like to have these conversations in advance of our meetup, because we can take these ideas that we already have around techniques, add them to the new information that we get from Webolutions about some of the tools that are out there, and hopefully expand our thinking even more. So that's kind of the whole point of creating this frame around the topic of using social media for customer retention. And again, next Tuesday, same time, same channel, next Tuesday, we'll be having our follow-up discussion, taking into consideration, now we'll sort of ruminate on what we've talked about here. We'll get our new information on Friday, and I'm sorry, Sheila, that you won't be with us on Friday, but I'd be happy to talk to you about what we learned. And then we'll have this follow-up conversation next Tuesday to see if it has expanded or changed our thinking at all on this topic. So we're down to the last 10 minutes already. I can't believe that, but it does seem that the time just flew by today, and I've been jotting down notes because other conversations that I just would like to get into. I want to thank everybody who's been leaving comments on the comment down here below the video on the event page. And I'll ask our panelists to go in and look at those comments, and if there's a comment that you can answer, if there's a question, something you want to acknowledge or recognize, please interact with the people who've been leaving comments. We have a small audience, but I do believe that this recording goes out to a larger audience later. A lot of people are 9-to-5ers and maybe commuting right now and don't get to sit in on this conversation, but we do appreciate those people who are here in real life. So I'm going to ask each one of you to take a moment in the panel here and let me know. Like I said, I've got a whole notebook of notes that I think were great points. Is there a particular takeaway that you hope our listeners are hearing? And also, do you have a call to action related to what you're doing, your business, or whatever? And I'm going to go in the same order that I introduced folks. So, Gary, I'm putting you on deck right now and ask you to kind of give us a closing statement as we get ready to wrap up this session.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for inviting me to participate and listening to some of my opinions. I am still very much in the dark on how the real world works, so it's an ongoing journey. However, I would leave the audience with this opinion that I have about the modern buyer in this century, and that is this, that the modern buyer is most interested in having their transaction facilitated. They may want a business relationship with their vendor, but the business relationship, the rapport, the social side of our world today, I believe is secondary. And I believe the buyer first and foremost wants their transaction facilitated. And so if we can tune in to facilitating their transaction, I believe they will come back and repeat their purchasing with us because we are the easiest to do business with.
I think it's a great point. On a consumer side, if I have somebody facilitating my transaction, I can't help but want to have a relationship with them. I become thankful and grateful and appreciative, and there's a lot of emotion that I think that having them facilitate my transaction brings up a lot of emotion in me, and to me that's the basis for a relationship. So I do think that while you're focusing on the transaction, Gary, which, you know, I expect my salesperson to focus on the transaction, I appreciate that, it will end up resulting in some sort of a desire to have a relationship.
So Debbie, if I might just counterpoint one last remark and then I'll let you move on. Who's the person at Amazon that has your relationship for your ebooks?
You mean like, do I have a name of a person?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if there's one person, but I've had two interactions. One guy's name was Alan, one guy's name was Steve. One time I had a problem with my e-reader when I was getting an ebook. It was going on two different devices, and I didn't know how to put them together, so I sent an email to their help or whatever it was, and I got a personal note, and he said, give me a call, we'll work this out. I'm sorry you're having the problem. And so I did. That was Alan. Then Steve, I wanted to buy a new camera for my iMac so that I would have a second camera source. And I wasn't sure if it would work with a Mac. I heard it only worked with, Windows or something like that. And do I need an extra cable? So I wrote them a note. That same day, I got an email from Steve. And he said, here's a picture of the cable that you'll probably use. Here's a link to an article about making it work with an iMac. And if you have any other questions, here's my email address. That to me seemed very relational, relationshipy. You know what I mean.
I do.
So does that answer your question? I mean, yeah, Amazon's huge, but every time I have posed a very specific question, I get a very specific response from a person, and I'm thrilled about that.
Fair enough.
That's that. Okay, and John, and you, I know last time we had an HOA, or last time you were on an HOA with us, you talked about creating really good, unique, valuable information, less but higher quality. So anyways, I just want to mention to you again, I see some consistency in your thinking here, so I know that you're on a mission. How would you like to close out today?
Well, first I'd like to thank all of our panelists for coming by. It's, it's been a great time this morning. It was wonderful to meet Sheila for the first time. She's pulled her face out of the crowd and in front of the camera, so thank you for doing that. And, I have to tell you, and I'm going to be honest here, Gary and I often have opposing opinions. And so it's great to have an opportunity to sit with him and get a deeper understanding of who he is, because I always learn so much, when he's on these HOAs. So I do want to tell you, Gary, I'm looking forward to a cup of coffee with you one day and picking each other's brains. So how would I like to close? Let me get back on task. Sorry about that, Debbie. I'd like to touch base a little bit with the social media as a retention tool versus a sales tool, because this leads, I think, directly to the action step. I believe that it's both. I believe that people are going to come to social media to discover who you are, what you're about, but they're also there because they've already built a relationship with you. So I think that social media as a retention tool belongs to both camps. But Forbes released an article, and we've talked about this on many of our HOAs. It says that 80% of the homework is already done by the time they pick up the phone and call you. In the past, it was, I have to pick up the phone and call Gary to find out what his company is about, how they can help me, and what their products are, because I have a ton of questions. Now with social media, that's shifted. I find out what a product is about. I find out what a company is about through social media and other channels before I ever call a company. I'm so much further into my buying phase before I reach out to a company. So this is why social media is important to both the sales and well, primarily we'll speak to the sales camp right now. In that research phase of the buying process, that prospect is getting to know you and your company through social media. You're setting up an expectation of experience, which is what Gary was talking about. When he's talking about people want to have their purchase facilitated, that's part of the experience that they're going to have with you, is that facilitation phase. And there's many other levels of the experience, but I agree with Gary that this is important. So if you're going to present yourself on social media, it needs to be authentic for the reasons of retention. If you set up an expectation and this customer comes in and does business with you, and their experience with you is not in alignment with what the expectation was that you created on social media, they're not going to come back and do business with you, right? Because it totally speaks to dependability, it speaks to consistency, it speaks to integrity. They're going to feel maybe a little lied to, right? So my action step is to continue your social media presence. Please increase the value so you're less chatter and more value. And please be as authentic as to who your company is as you possibly can, because you are developing a rapport with your prospect before they ever have an opportunity to speak with a sales rep. Right? And sales reps all know how important rapport is, right, Gary?
Actually, John, rapport is very 1990s.
Okay, so again.
and Gary is living up to his antagonist reputation.
And so, I appreciate that. I appreciate the counter voice.
Great for conversations, and I'm sure we'll have more of them. So thank you, John, for that, for the emphasis on value as opposed to chatter. And Peter.
All right. Two things I would think about. Number one, as I've been listening to it, I wouldn't worry about the din. We've talked about the din. We've talked about the glut. Don't worry about it. If you don't put anything out, the spammers and the chatterboxes are going to win. So make sure that you're putting stuff out. Don't worry about whether it's a home run, because that's way too much pressure. You need to be part of the conversation. You need to be out there. And if you're doing good stuff, over time, again, it's a long-term play, you're going to win. And number two, I wouldn't worry too much, to be a little bit contrarian here, about facilitating the transaction, because that might be replaceable. You could be, there's a website called Fiverr where people put up things they'll do for $5. There's a website, Mechanical Turk is an Amazon product where you can hire people for cents, for pennies on the dollar to do certain mechanical things. So social is your opportunity to prove what you bring beyond what you do. So that's my two ideas.
All right, wonderful, thank you. And Sheila, your closing remarks.
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate in this whole social media thing because I've just been in it so very long. I think my bulletin board went up in about 1997, and therefore I have a very well-established digital footprint. But in terms of DIN, if you're a patient and you've got a medical problem and you've flooded with DIN that's incorrect and inappropriate, and we've seen a lot of it just recently with a certain knee problem, I think that what I see as a key role for me is curating content, picking out of this DIN the content that really is correct and has value and can be verified and links back to authoritative sources. And that's really what I'm focusing on, even if I create content myself, which I'm hoping to do in a more artistic way. I want people to know that the work has come from published sources, and that I'm referring to people in authority when I'm creating the content, because there's just too much medical DIN out there. But in terms of the takeaway, Debbie, I think you came up with the best takeaway, is that we're still figuring it out. I think on Google Plus we're definitely still figuring it out. Last night's or this early morning for me's talk on communities was a revelation, really. And I think that that in terms of the communities that we've got on Google Plus, we will figure out the best way to handle the DIN and get the funnel the right way around and resolve the. I find the noise tremendous, but it will come, I'm sure, with time.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila. I so appreciate you being here, and it's fun to have. We normally don't have people outside of the SMGDenver group on the panel, but I thought this was an opportunity for a kind of a freshness factor. So thank you for adding that. And leading into my call to action, community is incredible. I'm going to post a link. I've been working with a woman named Heather Kraafter, and she was sort of the center of the HOA that Sheila referred to that we had yesterday, talking about community-centered HOAs. And Heather Kraafter has been working very hard on this, and I've been blessed to be part of her team. And then a fabulous article went out about her business and really stressed the importance of community. You'll notice over in the event description on this event page, I posted a link at the very bottom for the HOA Mastery group. Now, this is an affiliate link that Ronnie has allowed us to use to help people, get introduced to the HOA Mastery group. It's where Sheila and I met. I spent a lot of time there. The community is wonderful, and I swear it's changed my whole view of how to use these tools and social media, and it just seems so natural now to be there. So if you want to learn how to use HOAs to your advantage and part of your business strategy, do consider joining the HOA Mastery group. We learn an awful lot there, and it's a fabulous community. That's basically is what it is the community, the people you meet, and the relationships that you can build. I also want to just mention again on our comments, I see some great stuff in there. Sandra, thank you for putting the link to Flipping the Funnel book. David Veal has left some more great comments there, so I encourage everybody to take a look at those. With that, we're going to sign off. We went about 4 minutes over, so I apologize for that, but this was a great conversation. And panelists, please stay in the green room after I stop the broadcast so that we can just debrief. Thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see our Denver folks at the social media group meetup on Friday at 7:30 in the morning. Thanks a lot. We're signing off.